Everyone remembers Mike Zabonik from Iron Resurrection. He was the quiet guy behind some of the show's most impressive builds. But then, almost without warning, he was gone. No farewell. No big announcement. No explanation on screen. So what really happened to the man behind the welding mask? To understand why Mike disappeared, you have to understand how important he was at Martin Brothers Customs in Johnson City, Texas. Joe Martin created the designs, Amanda Martin kept the business running, and Jason "Shag" Arrington found forgotten cars and trucks waiting for a second life. But Mike was one of the craftsmen who turned those wrecks into something worth showing off. He cut away rust, shaped new metal, repaired floors, and made sure frames and body panels were strong and straight before the finishing work could begin. And unlike many reality TV personalities, Mike never seemed interested in being a star. He was calm, focused, and usually more interested in his work than the camera pointed at him. That quiet attitude made him a fan favorite. But as Iron Resurrection became a major hit, something began changing inside the shop. And that change may explain far more than fans realized. Building a custom vehicle normally takes months. Good metalwork cannot simply be rushed. Every cut has to be right, every panel has to fit, and every weld has to hold. Television, however, works on a completely different clock. Martin Brothers Customs suddenly had to squeeze huge amounts of craftsmanship into tight production schedules, sometimes forcing months of work into just a few weeks. For Mike, that meant his normal rhythm disappeared. Cameras crowded around his work area. Lights and cables filled the shop. He could be asked to stop working, repeat a movement, or redo something so it looked better on camera. Instead of simply concentrating on the metal, he had to work while being filmed. Long days became even longer, with intense heat, heavy equipment, and very little room to slow down. But the pressure was not only physical. Every season brought bigger expectations. Viewers wanted more extreme builds, more complicated modifications, and flawless results. A fabricator cannot simply undo a mistake after cutting into a classic body. One bad cut can destroy valuable metal or create a serious safety problem. So while audiences saw polished cars on television, the people building them were carrying an enormous amount of pressure behind the scenes. Eventually, fans noticed that Mike's screen time was shrinking. Then he disappeared completely. The strange part was how quietly it happened. There was no emotional goodbye episode. No detailed explanation from the show. Suddenly, the familiar face was missing, and the episode simply continued. That silence created a storm of speculation. Some fans wondered if Mike had suffered a health problem after years of welding, lifting, grinding, and working around metal dust and fumes. Others imagined arguments, money problems, or tension inside the shop. With no clear public explanation, rumors filled the gap. But was there really some dramatic secret hiding behind his departure? The reality appears much more human. Metal fabrication is hard on the body. Years of grinding, lifting heavy parts, bending steel, working in awkward positions, and standing over welding equipment can take a serious toll. Add long television production days and strict deadlines, and a job that was already demanding becomes even harder. There was another cost too, time. Late nights at the shop can mean missed dinners, lost weekends, and less energy for life outside work. And Mike was never someone who seemed to crave fame. He enjoyed building things. He did not need millions of viewers watching him do it. As the spotlight grew brighter, the simple pleasure of working with his hands was becoming harder to separate from the demands of television. So the question became simple. What mattered more, staying on a successful television show, or getting back control of his own life? There was also the reality of running a business. Martin Brothers Customs had to satisfy television producers while still serving paying customers. Parts had to be ordered. Workers had to be paid. Builds had to be completed. Insurance and other business costs still existed. Television added another layer of deadlines and financial pressure. That does not necessarily mean there was a secret feud. In fact, the picture is much less dramatic. Joe and Amanda had known their crew long before the cameras arrived, and the team was built around mutual respect. When someone decided that television no longer fit their life, stepping away could simply be a practical decision rather than a bitter breakup. And that brings us to Mike's real choice. Leaving Iron Resurrection did not mean he stopped loving cars or abandoned fabrication. Instead, he could return to working more independently, taking on projects on his own terms. Without producers demanding a certain pace or cameras interrupting the process, he could take the time needed to get a panel or frame exactly right. That freedom mattered. Mike could choose the jobs he wanted, work at a pace that suited him, and keep his private life private. In a world where many television personalities turn fame into merchandise, social media, and endless publicity, Mike went in the opposite direction. He kept things quiet. His path also had similarities to Javier "Shorty" Ponce, another familiar face from Martin Brothers Customs who eventually focused on his own custom body shop in Dallas. Both showed that leaving television does not mean leaving the craft. A talented builder can step away from the cameras and still build a respected career through skill, reputation, and word of mouth. So perhaps Mike's disappearance was never really a mystery. It was a decision. A decision to put family, health, freedom, and craftsmanship ahead of television exposure. And that choice says something bigger about Iron Resurrection itself. Reality television has always pushed talented builders to work faster than they naturally would. Shows such as Fast and Loud and Garage Rehab showed how intense production schedules could put pressure on automotive businesses. But custom metalwork needs patience. You cannot force years of experience into a television deadline without asking the people doing the work to pay the price. Mike's departure became a quiet reminder of that reality. The audience may want a spectacular transformation every week, but behind every finished car is a person doing difficult, physical work. When the pace becomes too much, even the most dedicated craftsman eventually has to decide what is worth sacrificing. Today, Mike Zabonik's legacy is not defined by how long he stayed on television. It is defined by the work he left behind and the reputation he built as a skilled, genuine craftsman. Fans still remember his calm personality, his attention to detail, and the way he seemed completely comfortable letting his work speak for him. In the end, Mike did not vanish because he failed. He stepped away because he chose a different kind of success. He chose more control over his time, more freedom in his work, and more space for the people and things that mattered outside the cameras. And maybe that is the most surprising part of the whole story. The man who helped bring so many forgotten vehicles back to life eventually decided to rebuild something for himself, a life on his own terms. Mike Zabonik never needed a television camera to prove he was a great builder. His work had already done that.